Thank you for joining me for the 10th and final video on Mandala Unplugged. It has been an incredible journey for me to watch the mandalas come through. You know, having something, creating a big project based on a simple drawing that I did is so rewarding. I can't thank you enough for joining me and stitching along with me, and keep watching for those mandalas to come through on my website, myhrequilts.com, and we'll have that art show. And even if it's, you know, we started this in January, and let's say it's even August and you're just starting, it's okay. Do the mandala, join the Facebook group. It's an incredibly supportive group. Lots of creativity, lots of ideas in that group. And just send your finished mandala into that group, or to me even in email, and I'll add it to the show. It's going to go till the end of 2018. So now that your gorgeous mandalas are all finished, let's go through a couple of ideas that you might want to use to finish yours off. So the first mandala that I did, I wanted to frame. These guys are so much fun, and they're frame worthy. So for a while I had this up with a white frame. This is a frame that I got from IKEA. It's a 20-inch frame. And then here's how it was hanging for a while without the red. The red is a new addition. It was just the purple and, you know, no red. The red just adds so much, so I'm really glad I'm doing it. But I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So it was just this purple fabric and then framed. And it's fine. It's just that the white frame, I don't know if it would have been my first choice. You know, IKEA has great frames. They're really cheap. I think these are like under 10 bucks. I love them because they already have the hanging stuff, so you don't have to worry about all of that, you know, when you take the frame off. And let's say I'm just using this now without the actual glass or the frame piece. I'm just using this as the board. I really like this board. It's not, you know, a flimsy board with just like a paper cutout frame thing. It's actually got the good metal gear on it. So so I love IKEA for that. But you might not have an IKEA by you, and that's fine. You know, you could get a 20-inch frame from Target or Joann's or Michael's, or there's a ton of different places you could just grab a random frame. I'm using a 20-inch frame. Of course, you could use a 17-inch frame, whatever, with a mat. I could have gotten a mat cut to frame this piece, but I'm way too lazy for that. I don't like going in and, you know, ordering things and waiting, and I don't know, that's just the way I roll. I'm just really too impatient for all that. So what I did was I removed the back of the frame, you know, the actual frame piece, and I spread on the back of it. I measured out the center 16 inches because that's how big my mandala was going to be. And actually my mandala was probably more like 17, you know, but the finished was like 15 to 16, somewhere in there. But you want to leave like an inch. Like I can feel it right here. My mandala goes out to here. So the center, just center this on the board, and what you're going to use is matte medium. And I know you've probably heard of this product. I like Golden a lot. It's Golden Gel Medium. Just get the regular gel matte, and it acts not only as a paint thickener but also as a glue. And there's lots of good glues on the market, but I really love this because you can spread it really fast. You can put your finished project down on it, and you can sort of move it around to get it centered within 30 seconds. You know, you've got a little window where you can move it around and make sure it's good and centered. It's really a great glue because it's flexible when it dries. So, you know, if you used hot glue, in this case, it won't be good because you know how fast that stuff dries and you won't be able to move your piece. But it kind of dries, it looks like hot glue, almost it's got a waxy, flexible sort of feel to it. So I really love this stuff. But when you go to glue your mandala onto the frame, it will curl. So what you want to do for 24 hours is just put books set right on top of it. You know, just make sure it's all covered and put heavy books, you know, like stacks of 4 books, and leave it for 24 hours. And that way your whole piece stays nice and flat, because it does curl. Even with this hardboard, it'll curl slightly, just well. Once I've done that, now I've got a border, a 2-inch border, where I have nothing but the frame board itself. So what I did there was, because of course this is already quilted, I wanted this to be elevated. Now if you used matte, you know, if you wanted to go and get a matte cut out and then just pop the frame on, you're done, good to go, easy. But I love the idea of this sort of quilted, it's not really quilted, it's puffy, you know, it kind of sticks out like quilted border with some of the fabric that coordinated. So all I did was I put 3 layers of batting on the sides. Right, so right next to, like right, here's where the mandala ends, and then I've got batting, 3 layers of batting, cotton batting that goes all the way out to the sides. And for that, I just popped some hot glue in there because I really just wanted it to be raised. Okay, so to complete the stitching, the borders on this, if you want to do fabric borders like I did, just real quick, here's what I've got going here. This is the frame, of course, the side that doesn't have the metal, that would obviously be on the back, but just be mindful of that because those kinds of things happen to me all the time, or I would glue it to the metal thing, not thinking it through. And then I've got this, of course, glued on with my gel matte medium. And 24 hours later, after I had put, you know, my heavy books on it and it laid flat, and I was sure of that, I had this like mandala with raw edges that come to about right there, all the way around. If you press on it, so you can see. And that was all glued. And again, if you want to go, take it in, get a matte cut in whatever color you think coordinates, and just pop it right over there and pop the frame on, you are good to go. It is done. Yay. But if you like the idea of these fabric borders, and again, they're not really quilted, but they're just puffy. You know, they feel really good, and I think they go really great with the piece. So these 3 layers of batting that elevate the sides up to the same height as my centerpiece, they're not totally glued in. You know, there's just like, here's a one little dab right here of hot glue, and then there might be one here. You know, I didn't want to lose the puffiness, I just wanted it to stay in place. So just little dots of hot glue all around just so that they stay put while you do your stitching. And of course, in hand stitch style, I wanted to make sure that this was totally hand stitched, no machine at all. So all I did was I took a piece of fabric and I folded it under, you know, maybe 1/4 inch, and I laid it straight across, as straight as I could, you know, from point to point. And I hand stitched it in place, just like applique stitch, like a binding, every 1/4 inch. And you can see right here, I did that. I did this side first, and then I just went straight over and I stitched right on top. So it's not mitered, it's not anything tricky other than it's straight fabric, straight fabric. Now, initially I had this bigger, I had it cut. So let's say you're not going to do this extra quilt binding and you just want to call it good. You want to stick a frame on it like I had it. Make this a little longer. So if we've got 2 inches here, you need 2 1/4 for this. And then let's make it, I would go 3 1/4 so that you can fold it under and very neatly glue it on the back, because you're not going to want to see the back with all that funky, crazy, you know, just stuff. I know it's the back, and who really cares? But at the same time, you know, when you flip a piece of art over and the back is neat, it kind of looks good. And this looks really neat on the back, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. So that's fine. You know, you can hot glue that part in place. So once you have your fold back there, then just run a line of hot glue and just pop it in place and it'll stick. It's awesome. And that's what I did with this. But I love the idea of this looking like a quilt block, no frame or anything. So what I did was I took some red fabric that I thought coordinated. This red was not used anywhere in this mandala. I just really like it with all the colors. So last night I thought, just to get prepared, I made almost like a quilt binding. You know, it's a quilt block, so why not make it look like a quilt, a little mini quilt. So I did a 2 1/2 inch strip, folded it in half, pressed it, folded it in half again, pressed it, and then folded just one side up and pressed it. That little side that's folded up goes right along the raw edge. So if you're going to do this binding, you could cut your fabric and your batting absolutely to the edge. You see, I have this is a raw edge right here, because really all we're going to do is hand back stitch this in place. Now I know you could certainly do this on machine, you could do all kinds of things on the machine, but for me, one, I wanted to keep it unplugged, and the other thing is that takes more planning, and I'm not a big planner. You know, I want to just dive in and do this thing. So. Okay, so these binder clips, gosh, don't you just love these? They're wonder clips. They're so incredible. Such a great use. This is an awesome use for those because it kind of clamps this to your board even. Okay, so let's see, where did I leave? And you know, you'll have to keep adjusting this. You know how it is when you sew and things get all shifty around. To start a new thread, I'm just going to pop it underneath. Just through one of the layers of the batting or whatever. Okay. And then we're going to do the back stitch. So that just means we're going to, so gosh, this is hard to say. I know it's red. This is where my thread is coming out right here. I'm going to just go, you know, 1/8 of an inch behind it, pick up some of that batting. And obviously my raw edges are together. And everything is raw edge batting. I've got the edge of the frame, raw edge of this, raw edge of this. And then just come out 1/8 of an inch on the other side. And this is relaxing. You know, I know things can be done much faster on the machine, but I feel like I have full control here. I didn't really have to plan anything out. I could just kind of as you go. You know, that's my whole shtick. Just work it as you go, design as you go. And you could just sit this on your lap in front of the telly and just stitch it, and it's going to look great. And then when you reach the corner, you know, just give it a, you don't obviously want the raw edge on the corner, so just kind of curl it in a little bit under. I like to have it hanging over just a little bit on the edge. Just finger press it in place, and then fold it back up like you had it, and then stitch it to the end. And you know, doing this method, you really could, if you had yardage, you could cut this like one big long quilt binding, like you would normally bind a quilt. Work your mitered corners and then hot glue it to the back. And that was actually going to be my plan. I was going to do that, but then when I found this fabric, I had just a little bit left and I didn't have yardage. So I thought, well, you know, easily you could just do one side at a time. Okay, just run it through. Can work a nice little knot here. This is all going to get covered. So, okay. So then as far as gluing it on the back, start at the tip and just pop a little bit of glue on that raw edge, because you know, on the one end you're going to have just that little bit of rawness. And then go ahead and fold your edge, and then while you're, you know, hold that in place so that the corner stays. Just for a minute, and then just run your line of glue. Just continue on down, maybe doing 8 inches at a time. Fold it over. Hold it in place, and then just run it the rest. And I do this as soon as I stitch one side, I'll hot glue it down, stitch the other side, hot glue it down, stitch the other side, hot glue it down. So it's sort of a stitch it, fold it back, glue it, and then go all the way around on the side. And of course, if you just worked your regular quilt binding, that's fine too. Then just stitch the whole thing and then come along and just hot glue it in place. Lift up your framework here, all right, and then glue the rest. And so what you'll have is the front side, which looks really great. Looks like a traditionally bound quilt, mini quilt, that you can hang on the wall, but there's no wrinkling or puckering or any of that because it's on a board, so it's going to lay really straight for you. And then here's the back, and the back looks really good too. So you can sign the back or sign the front, however you want to do it. And that is a completed framed piece. Okay, so those are great options for hanging your piece. And you know, the thing is when we had this curled under, we do still have enough to go ahead, and if you don't care what the back looks like, you can curl this under as much as you want to and actually use this and just border it and you're done. And throw a quilt sleeve on it and you're good to go. If you don't care what the back looks like. You know, here's the back of mine. It's you know, it's a mess. It's not super tragic, but I wouldn't want anyone to really see that. The thing about gluing it onto the frame board was awesome because it hides all this, and it's not as scary to glue because it's such a mess. And it also helps flatten out your piece, because I know these get a little wobbly. You know, we did a lot of stitching on this guy. So let's say you wanted to use your piece in maybe a quilt as inspired quilt, you know, a decorative throw. Obviously nobody's cuddling up to this, but it might be nice to have, you know, a pillow or in the middle of some sort of throw that maybe hangs over your couch or something, and you want to continue on in the textile with this. What you're going to do first is just go ahead and undo your folded up basted binding. These lines here, you could take a little mini iron and just press those lines right out, and you won't see those, although they'll probably be covered. You know, your whatever it is that you do, whether you do a quilt or you know, you're going to go ahead and just end it here. It could go right on that line, so you may not even have to do that. And then the other thing to flatten this out that might help is just turn your piece over and take an iron, just a regular iron with steam, and hold it just above the piece, you know, maybe lightly touch it and then just steam it out. And that sort of relaxes some of the fibers and makes it lay a little flatter, so that can help. Obviously, we're not touching an iron to our piece with all of our beads and our sparkles and all of that stuff, unless you're just right here trying to get these lines out. I'm not going to worry too much about it because I want to keep going and maybe make this a medallion or some sort of decorative throw, since I already have one for the wall. But for now, go ahead and take all of this and undo it as best you can, and then we're going to talk about some options to turn this, to make this an even bigger textile. Okay, so once you have your piece laying as flat as it can be, steamed out, you can go ahead and cut your piece square. Mine ended up to be 17 1/4 all the way around. And you know, you're gonna find places where, like, let's say up here, you know, this didn't exactly fall right to the corner. You know, like, I think I have a little bit more space here than here. And if yours came out perfect, you are going to have to write in and tell us all how you did that. But you know what? It's close enough. I definitely have at least 3/4 of an inch from every, you know, motif, every stitch that I did. So I've got some room to play, and you should too, because we started with a bigger piece than we were going to. So you should have plenty of room to either put a mat over or frame or whatever. But let's say you don't want to mess with that matte medium, you don't want to put any glue on it, totally understandable, and that's fine. So here's another option for you. To put on a back that looks much, much better, all we're going to do is cut a piece of fabric that, you know, that you like, that coordinates. Here's mine. Now the size of that piece will depend on what you're going to do with it. I'm going to cut it flush once again because I'm going to move on and I'm going to make it into a bigger art piece, a quilt that will maybe hang on the back of a couch or something. So I'm not worried about how much I have left here. All I need to know is it's even, maybe just a little bit bigger. But let's say you want to hang this up. You would make sure that you're going to, you know, cut a piece that's at least an inch bigger so that you can roll it and fold it in like we had it before, and then stitch that in place. Make sure it's a back that you like, that coordinates, because you will see it on the front. Make sure it is at least an inch bigger on all sides, because we're going to do a little bit more stitching, and really not that much more. I haven't totally decided, so I'm not going to do the stitching here. This is really more about me talking this through with you. But what I would do, you know, for my false back, is I would go ahead and just grab that original thread that we did all of these stitches, and then just, you're going to lay some more stitches in there, just so it almost looks like, you know, we didn't even do this pre-quilted. You know, like we just did our front and didn't have any sort of batting or backing or anything on it. And the reason why we didn't do that is it would have never laid like this. We had to have that structure, so that's why we do it that way. But anyway, so I think what I would do is I would come in with that thread and I would maybe stitch around each one of these, you know, so that it incorporates the back. I would come all the way through. Now that's going to be harder. You're going to have to take some bigger stitches because, you know, we've got batting and a backing, and now we have an additional backing. So just take bigger stitches, and, you know, if you don't want to see anything, of course, you can just go out around these motifs, hide them. You can, you know, maybe put an additional bead or something right here, and then just make it look really nice and neat on the back. You know, don't put any knots on the back. Do one stitch towards the back, pull in the back so that the back is attached to this, and then when you move or when you knot, just make sure you're knotting it inside the piece so you're not seeing it in the back. All the way out, you know, you can run a line, a seam line up these leaves. Any stitching that you want to do that will make the back stay really nice and flat and really help the piece. It's even going to give you even more structure, so it could even lay flatter. Now, if you were going to hang this up, of course, you would just take your excess fabric here, you would roll it and roll it again and hand stitch it like we did before, and voila, you're done. You know, just you could even use your original line as your guide. If you're going to continue on with quilting, then you would cut it flush and, of course, leave, for now, until you know what you're going to do, just leave that extra 3/4 inch all the way around. So let's say if you were going to do a pillow, you could get a pillow the exact size of this, make your pillow casing. Lots of instructions that you guys probably already know how to do. It's pretty simple. Lots of instructions on how to do that. And then you could add like a rolled binding or stitch it, and then this would be your pillow. Let's say though you have a 20-inch or a 24-inch pillow and you just want this to be centered, and you're thinking, gosh, I really want to add a border on here. You can't just add a fabric border because, of course, this is all quilted out. It'll look odd. So the product that I use, and I think I talked about it earlier, is I would take the border that I had and I would put fusible fleece on that, and that will puff that up a little bit so that it will match how thick this is. And you may need 2 pieces of fusible fleece. So let's say this is my border, and I want this attached, you know, to all the sides. This is 3 inches, so just for example. And then this is the fusible fleece product that I talk about. It's fusible on the one side, so I would just take and leave a 1/2 inch. So what I have is a 3-inch border here and a 2.5-inch piece of fusible fleece. Of course, this would be longer. It's just a little example. Press it here. Now, if this isn't thick enough, take another piece of fusible fleece and press it on here. That way the batting stays, everything stays really nice. You can quilt them. You can do whatever you want to them. This 1/2 inch here, all you would do, match the raw edges up and stitch a line on the 1/4 inch. That way, when you fold your piece up, that 1/4 inch, there's no fusible fleece on top of the quilt whatsoever. You know, you've got your 1/4 inch sewn, your 1/4 inch on top. Where the fusible fleece starts is where this quilt ends. And that is a way to add a border onto a piece that's already quilted. I do that all the time. So that's pillow making, you know, or if you wanted just to have this piece and have extra borders without that frame, you could do that too. Lots of options here. Lots of options. And if any of this is confusing to you, please just write in, you know, questions, because I know I'm just going through this really fast. I just want to give you guys some ideas. Now, let's say I've added my false back, because of course the back is going to show. This is going to be in a textile piece. There are 2 ways that you can add further quilted pieces onto your mandala. You know, so let's say you're doing a medallion, or you want to do almost a courthouse steps where you're adding 2 of the same pieces here and 2 up here. You can add quilted pieces with a sashing or without a sashing. So in my book, if you have my book, page 25, this is a very detailed way of adding a quilted piece to another quilted piece without a sashing. you know, there's just a couple of little rules that you have to go through, and I can talk it through. It's a little hard to explain. It's just better to have the book or the visual. But essentially, let's say this is a quilted piece that I wanted to add onto here. This is my quilted piece. It's much bigger than this. It's big. And I have my batting on it. I have a backing, of course, because this is going to be connected right to here. So I've got batting, backing, everything. The one rule, and let's say I'm adding this with no sashing, the one rule you have to follow, and this is, of course, explained in much more detail in my book, is that you have to stay away, a ½ inch away from this joining section here. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to add it to the piece, because you've got to be able to add it to the piece and then cut away that extra batting. So whatever it is, whatever quilting you want to do is fine. It's just that you really, and what I do is I put a piece of blue painter's tape and I would just free motion quilt this, do whatever you want to do. Hand, of course, if you're wanting to stay unplugged, whatever you want to do, and then you would trim this so that you could stitch this 1/4 inch on with no batting. We are never sewing 2 pieces of batting together. We're always sewing the top part to the 3, or in our case 4 layers, folding it back, cutting that extra batting, and then hand stitching it in place in the back. That's a lot of information to say without actually showing you how to do that. I know that. If you go to my video on the Ohio Star quilt that I did last year, I show how to do that. If you have my book, of course, you know, I go through how to do that, because that's my whole thing. Everything I do, I quilt it first, then I add the fun stuff, then I add them together, because I don't like running a whole big thing through my machine. I can't stand doing that. I don't like to work on bigger pieces than my 24 by 36 mat. That's just me. It's just the way I like to do it. I don't like to get stuff sent out. There's nothing wrong with that. I just don't do that. I like to do everything myself. That's just how I am. So let's say you wanted to add a piece to this with a sashing. Then the rules are pretty easy. You can quilt anything however you want to. And of course, on page 39 of my book, I talk about that. Let's see if I can get to that page. You know, this is, okay, how to join with a sashing. And you know, the book that I wrote, I have a lot of pictures, because I love this method so much. I love Quilt As You Go. I love, you know, my Quilt As Inspired method. And, you know, as you can see, I go through a ton of pictures and how to add these quilted pieces together. It's a really, really fun way to work, because no matter what you do, you know, this is preserved. There's no way to really mess this up. Every experiment you want to try, everything you want to do, you would do off of this piece, and if you love it, that's when you would add it on, and you could do it in those 2 different ways, with the sashing or without. With the sashing is pretty common. I mean, I'm not saying that I made that up. I didn't. It's everywhere. You know, you just sew a sashing here and a strip on the back, and then add this to the piece and hand stitch it in place. It's really simple. The without sashing, though, that's the method that I created, because I didn't always want a sashing, obviously, when I'm joining the 2 quilted pieces together. So I worked hard and came up with a method to do that. So I will probably, I think this is going to lend itself really well to a medallion style quilt. And I will keep you posted as to my progress. If I do anything super spectacular, I'll do a video on it. So there is a way to continue on with this piece if you want this bigger. There's lots of different ways. You know, that false back, though, no matter what you do, if you're not gluing, I would definitely do that false back. Some of you are interested in continuing on. Just let me know. Just pop it in the Facebook group and tell me what your intentions are, because I think we'd all benefit from seeing all the different ways that we can finish off our mandalas. Okay, so those are a couple ideas on finishing. Now let me show you how I actually created this design. Okay, so here's a real big close-up of my iPad. The background is actually a mandala, believe it or not. Shocking, I know. So anyone who has upgraded, who has an iOS device and upgraded to iOS 11 knows that half your apps are no longer good because the developers are not updating them. That is true of the program that I created the original mandala in, of course. But fear not, there's some other programs that are really fun. So Mandala is a iTunes program, you know, where you can add paintbrushes and just kind of play around. It's really fun. Lots of different things there. I'm not going to go even anywhere near too much more about that because that's not actually anywhere near the program I use. But it's a way to make and control a mandala design. So here's what it looks like. It's called Mandala. But the one that I found that I actually really like that's really similar to the one that I actually used is called Dream Tunes. Okay, here's what I'm discovering. Every time I talk, the thing flashes and it's going to put you guys into a strobe-like seizure. It's terrible. So what I'm going to do is wait till the mandala is something that I like or something I think I can work with, and I'm going to quick do a screenshot. And so I'm not talking through this process. All a screenshot is hitting your start button and your home button at the same time, okay? So see, yikes. Okay. Once you have used that mandala, and it'll be for, it's a time suck because it is so pretty, and you can listen to your relaxing music and just kind of watch it and play with it. It's really fun. Once you've used screenshot to capture a couple of those images, what they're going to do is go into your photos. So then you can go into your photos and find the one that really speaks to you. You know, here's a couple that I did just in our little demonstration. You know, where you can see a lot of this stuff can be translated to stitching and textiles. Very cool stuff. This is the one that I chose for the one that I created, believe it or not. Can you believe our mandala came from this? And there's a million different ways to interpret that. This app right here is called Procreate. It is a fantastic app. It is $10, which is kind of a sticker shock, isn't it, when you're talking about apps which are usually either free or 99 cents or whatever. 100% worth it because it does everything that I need. It does everything that I need. I design in it. I mean, I am constantly designing in this app. It is so much fun. It deserves its own video, and I believe that I think maybe I will do a video on how to actually get around in Procreate. I think it's pretty user-friendly. I mean, it's an Apple, you know, iOS product, so of course it's going to cater to being very user-friendly. It does everything that I need Photoshop to do. Of course, it's not anywhere near the program Photoshop is, but I don't know how to do 90% of Photoshop. It doesn't matter. I only know how to do what I need it to do. So this $10 app is like gold to me. You start a new program and you can color the background. This works in layers. These are the layers that I did. I use an Apple Pencil, but of course you could use your finger. You could use you know, just one of those stylus. You can use anything. I like the Apple Pencil, though. The Apple Pencil is so phenomenal because it can sense your pressure, and it's just a nice program to draw with. First thing I did was I inserted that photo. Remember, that came from my photos. And how you do that, there's a little button right here. Here you could say insert a photo. It would bring you to your library, and you choose the photo, and then bam, it just pops it right up. It's super slick. You can lighten it up. You know, it used to be real bright, but I want to draw over it, so I don't want it to be super bright. Okay, so there's my layer. Now to draw, I want to preserve that. So to draw on that, what I did was I added another layer. You can see all of that stitching. But what's funny, I didn't even do that stitching until later. The first thing I did was I added a layer and I started to draw. Let's go ahead and add a layer, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, we'll add a layer to our original photo. As long as that layer is highlighted, that is the one I'm going to be drawing on. Okay, so then let's see, I'll take, so for the purposes of you being able to see this, we'll go with white. And I went in and I thought, oh yeah, that would be kind of a cool shape. Obviously this isn't exactly what I did, but you can kind of see where you would just draw on each shape of your mandala, right? And you, of course, you can color them any way you want to. This is just easy to see on screen. And I'm just drawing these certain shapes. Now, if I take the original layer away, my photo, there I have my drawing. There are lots of different mandala makers. Of course, you could easily do this with a mandala maker. I like to do this because it's more mindful for me. You know, I can make my own sort of decision, so I think it's really fun to play with. You know, and if you mess up, I love drawing this way because you just two finger tap and it takes anything icky that you don't like away. Okay, so that's essentially what I did, and I want my thing back, so let's redo. So there's the photo, and then I drew and I drew and I drew, and I came up with, can delete that, I came up with this. And then once I took the photo away, here's the drawing. Once I had the drawing, I could say, okay, this is all going to be embroidery. Obviously, it's so tiny. But this could be applique, and this is definitely Oya. And you see, our Oya is now facing out the other way. Originally, I drew it facing in, but there just wasn't room for that. And those are the kinds of decisions that you can make when you're working on your textile piece. It doesn't matter, you know, it's all going to be symmetrical. And as we know, the human eye loves symmetry, so it doesn't really matter. And I talked about, you know, these actually became completely different flowers than they were, but it doesn't matter because this is a reference. You know, this is a drawing, so there's no right or wrong. Nobody says that it has to be exactly how you drew it. It's just really fun to do. Super relaxing. This lent itself to the knitted leaf that we did. These were crocheted, obviously way bigger than they are in the drawing. I printed it on an 8-inch piece of paper. And then I took each measurement and I multiplied it by 2 because I knew I wanted a 16-inch mandala. So this is, if this is a 1/2 of an inch, it became an inch, right? And it will just grow that way because if you're doubling it, all you have to do is double each motif. It's really simple. Then I had to decide, you know, we had to get the stitching in. So then I did a different layer right here, added a layer, and then I thought, let's see what that's going to look like with some stitching. And there's the stitching, right? Then you take this layer away. I'm just unchecking. Maybe you can't see that in the camera. There. Then you just uncheck the box. Now I have my stitching. Now I have my framework that I can go back in, and they're guidelines essentially. Then I thought, well, this was before I decided I wanted to do this all unplugged, hand-pieced. What would free motion look like? Pretty cool. You could free motion that in one color thread and then add your mandala back in. And then behind the mandala, you have just meandered free motion stitching. So if you want to know what that's going to look like, that's kind of what it'll look like. So super pretty. But I really have grown so much to love hand stitching. Sometimes I don't want to be hunched over my machine. You know, I just want to be stitching and relaxed. So I thought, no, we don't need to do that. But it's there in case I need to. You can do as many layers as you want to. You can add so many layers to this thing. So that every time you do, you know, let's say I wanted to do more drawing on this, I would add another layer. And then I would just kind of see, gosh, what would this look like if we outlined it in, you know, some thread, or, you know, we took a ribbon and we outlined it. What would that even look like? And then if you decide you hate it, you don't have to go back and worry about erasing it on your thing. You're just like, no, I hate that. And then you can delete it. So I will do a more comprehensive program, because for quilt design, for any kind of design, it is incredible. But that's how I came to this design. Okay, so if you don't have an iPad, you're not comfortable drawing on it, whatever, you look at this. I mean, how many of these do you guys have? If you're like me, I can't even color in these because I can't commit to the coloring. I just really like these for applique designs and quilting designs. That's how I use these. Literally, I never color in these books. I shouldn't say never. There's a couple that I do have out that I color, but I feel for me, it's more relaxing to try to draw these out and come up with a textile for them than it is to actually color in them. So you can imagine that you know, this is an 8.5 piece paper. 8.5 by 11, just the size of a normal piece of paper. This rips out, so you could even just rip it out and not deal with the book. Put a piece of tracing paper over it, right? Trace the ideas, the things that you want to, that you think might look really good in a textile or a quilting design or an applique or whatever, and trace it. And then to blow it up, again, you know, if this is an inch, just make it 2 inches. You know, it's going to work. And every single thing that you design, you know, would grow in that same way. Each motif, you would multiply the size by whatever math you're doing. So I don't run to the copier place, and I don't make big copies and tape stuff together generally. There are times where I do that. But I really like to do this by hand. And I do have another video of taking a design, a picture, even just a tiny little picture, doing that grid enlargement. I love to do that. Not only is it great because you don't have to run to the copier and you don't have to deal with all of that, but you really get to know your design when you stitch it out. You're really more in tune with it, you're more mindful of it, and so I highly recommend learning how to enlarge your drawings, your pictures, your anything by doing that grid draw. And again, from last year, I do have a video on enlarging a picture. So you could look at it that way, and you may think that's difficult, but I don't think it's any more difficult than getting in your car. And you know, a lot of the times I like to do this stuff in the middle of the night or super early in the morning. Those places aren't even open yet. So I like to make sure I know how to do everything myself. And you know, if you're a big fan of going to the copier, of course, go ahead and go to the copier and make yourself a couple big photos and color in, and you know, think of the textiles that you could do with some of this stuff. So that is how I came to create the design. Of course, there's a million different ways to do it, but that's the way that I did this one. And there's a lot of really fun apps out there, so have fun shopping for those and have a great time with that Tunes app where you can listen to your music and play. It's just, oh my gosh, it's so much fun. So I hope you found some of those ideas to finish off your mandala useful. Let us know if you come up with anything different. We would all love to see, you know, what you're going to be doing with your mandala. Pop that picture on the Facebook group and let us know, you know, kind of let us see your drawing and see what textiles you're going to turn your little motifs into. We'd all love to see that. So we'll keep that going. I do have another project in the works, but it won't be till fall until that comes through. I've got a few guilds that I'm going to go visit and teach at. It's going to be fun. I do have some retreats. I've got one in July and one in September, so if you want to come to Colorado and play with me, there's a couple of spots left. I'm in both of those retreats. So just hit myhrequilts.com and you can see details. And then if you want to know more about that, just email me and I'll send you, you know, sort of what's included and what you'll need to bring and all of that good stuff. And then from, you know, between this project and the one coming up, if you want to check out a quilt along that we did, go to thequiltshow.com with Ricky Timms and Alex Anderson. And last summer I designed a project for them called Zoo Nouveau, and it went over a few months. I think it was like 10 or 11 videos. So as a star member of thequiltshow.com, that's free to you. So if you would just go into the classrooms on their website, you can find that there. And it's, here's a picture of it here. It uses a lot of techniques, and it uses my Quilt is Inspired method, so that you'll learn how to join quilted pieces together with and without a sashing. Unfortunately, my kits are gone for that project as well. I know you'll see something about they were on Etsy, but there's a huge materials list, and I go through another way of gathering materials. I think you'll find, you know, pretty easy, and it's another great way to use up stash. So definitely check that out. And then for the next project, I promise I will have more kits available. I know that they sell out really quickly. At least I'll have starter kits so that you'll be able to have a place to start with beads and yarns and threads, because I know those are, if you're a quilter, those are the things that are kind of harder to find. Of course, we have a huge fabric stash, most of us, so if you can find a starter kit that goes with in a colorway that you really like, I will have more available for the next project. So look for those on my Etsy store. And of course, that's the beauty of cross crafting, is that you are doing a little bit of a lot of different techniques. So we just need a little bit of materials here and there, which is why it's so time consuming to put the kits together, because there's a lot of components but a little bit of each component. So I'm trying to do a good job of telling you what you need, and you know, hopefully you can upcycle and recycle and use some stash. The other thing I'll be doing this summer is working on my next book, my second book, Quilt is Inspired, and that will be very heavy in how to use scraps and stash, because I think that is so fun, and that's what I think kind of stops us from doing things like paper piecing and go cutting and, you know, and those kinds of things, because there's so much fabric waste. You know, when we're fussy cutting out of fabric, now our fabric looks like Swiss cheese, and what do you do with the rest of that fabric? So that's kind of where I want to pick up and say, you know, there's go ahead and do that paper piecing and do those projects where you're cutting those big templates out and fussy cutting, because there's so much you can do with the rest of those fabrics. And so the book will be pretty heavy on that, so I'm going to start that this summer too. So we're going to keep that Facebook group alive, and I'm going to be popping little hints of the next project coming through. I'll probably throw a couple videos through the spring and summer your way, just on some cross crafting. The next project will be, of course, a cross-craft project, but it won't be a mandala, so that's your first hint. And again, I just cannot thank you enough for stitching along with me in this project. It's been an incredibly rewarding experience for me to take a drawing and put it out there into the universe and have you guys stitch along with me and really enjoy the process. So gosh, I just can't wait for the next one. So thank you so much, and in the meantime, be well, take care, and hit me up with any questions, comments, ideas, whatever you got. Let's stay in touch. Let's stay connected.